his lecture, which he gave, a fairly short lecture in the famous hall theater in Paris, which we'll hear about in a few minutes. And we'll also be hearing his lecture in the temple, small temple in Paris on this day, 26th of June, 1971. So we're going back exactly 50 years in time. The lecture in the Olympia Hall, famous hall in the center of Paris, was on the evening of the 25th. It's quite late in the evening, actually. So what we see on the screen right now is an old photo of what was the American Center at 26, well, it was the American Art and Cultural Center or something, in a place called Boulevard Raspail Montparnasse, which is quite a famous area of central Paris. And this was a meeting place for many young alternates from different parts of the world. France and other countries would hold their programs here. It should be many of the early, not Ely, early devotees. I don't know what Ely means. It should be early devotees who came into contact with Krishna consciousness, met here or came into contact here. This the preaching in Paris started in 1969 with the two devotees who came from America, Umapati Prabhu at that time and Hanuman Prabhu were the first ones in Paris, and then from there it gradually grew. And as we heard quite a lot last night, if you were with us, the wonderful pastimes and understandings that some of these early devotees had in their experience of Srila Prabhupada's coming, their experience of what it was like. So we're going to briefly just show one or two pictures, and I guess we'll go into the lecture after that. We'll see. So this is the one of the first meeting places they had in Paris. Oh, I keep forgetting it's a different system. Here we go. So this is an early newspaper article, actually, which we cut and pasted onto the PowerPoint. These are two or three of the earliest devotees in Paris. This is Yogeshwar Prabhu. I wanted to show it last night. I forgot. Yogeshwar was with us last night. He's at the front of the kirtan there. This is Lochanananda Prabhu. And who is this? Pardon? I'm not sure. I've forgotten who it is. Someone did say. There's Lochanananda and Yogeshwar. And they're on Harinam somewhere. On the streets there. We heard many wonderful stories about those early Harinams last night. And this is an article in the newspaper. We don't have time to go through it. If you want to, we can show it to you later. Bob Dylan's come in there somehow or another. Another Harinam, and little difficult. The picture was very kind of faded. And that's Hari Vilas there, of course, second from the right in the front. And they all look very ecstatic, interesting looking group going down some side streets in Paris, as we heard last night. Hari Vilas again with famous actor, I think, isn't he? Michel Piccoli. Michel Piccoli. And, they had all kinds of contacts. They would meet people. They were kind of, in the scene in those days, as we heard last night. Another Harinam in front of the Champs-Élysées. Difficult to recognize the devotees in that picture. It's, again, a very faded picture, or faint, not very good resolution. But anyway, devotees are there, ecstatically chanting. An article. This article is in English from the International Herald and Tribune. And it's quite an interesting article. Again, we don't have time to go through it now. Woomapati. Wooma. And this is, you can read there. It's we heard last night how the devotees were staying in back to Lu apartment. Back to Lu became Lochanananda later on. Initiated. Pardon?
Is it Chinese?
He's what?
Lu is a Chinese word, no?
You know, Lu is American. Very common American word, Lu.
Okay.
L-O-U, Lu. It's also a Chinese word, you're right. But it's also quite common name. It's sometimes short for Lucas and other names like that, not Lucifer, not Lucas. Back to Lu offered his apartment for the devotees to use, and this is a picture. It appears that the building is still there, same building, in Rue you say Lacaz? Lacaz? How do you pronounce it?
Yes.
In south of the city center. And that became a temple for a good part of the year. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was there, and many devotees were there, staying with Lu at that time, holding programs in Hari Vilas before he found the building. This is where they were holding their programs. So it's quite historic in there. This is Shudi. I don't know if any of you know Shudi. Yeah, this is Shudi with Hari Vilas in Lu's apartment there, Lochananda's apartment.
The one who pioneered South Africa?
Yeah, one of the main pioneers in South Africa. He was there. Panchadravida was there. Before they became devotees, they were coming to this place. And many people were coming who later on became devotees, like Shudi. Kevin, his name was. Finally he joined in Laguna Beach. But they introduced a lot of devotees there in the early days of Paris, 1970, this picture, or early 71 maybe. And there's again on the left, again is Shudi and Hari Vilas, and the matter, that must have been Madri. Perhaps it looks a bit like Madri on the other photograph. This is definitely Madri. Madri was the wife of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was here for quite some time in Paris. Prabhupada wanted him to preach in Europe, city to city, and he spent several months here in Paris. He basically introduced the Harinam on the streets. He organized the Harinam to Tamal Krishna Maharaj around Paris. And he's actually performing a wedding ceremony there. It's a question mark whose wedding it is. I've had two different remembrances of that. We're not sure. It may have been Aradhana and Santanu. It may have been Umapati and Ilavati. We're not sure who it was. So anyway, he was performing a wedding ceremony there in the apartment of Lochanananda Prabhu. Interesting early days. Interesting letter, which Prabhupada had written to Hari Vilas in 1970, because he was like, as we heard last night, Prabhupada, actually it was Harit Saduta, who at that time was kind of GBC, had asked all the devotees to come to India to join Prabhupada. They were struggling in Paris, apparently. And most of them went, and only Hari Vilas and Lochanananda and back to Jamal remained behind. So most of them had gone to India, and Hari Vilas became the leader of the devotees in Paris. Anyway, so again, another thing, which we don't really have time to read all this, of course, but if you want to, I can give you a copy. Various letters saying different. These were the different. Obviously, as we heard last night, time, place, and circumstances, the presentation of Krishna consciousness may expand into various other areas, mature, etc., over the generations, over the years. And letter to Yogeshwar. Very soon, Prabhupada says, I shall be coming to Europe. On the 20th of June, I'll be going to Moscow for 5 days. And from there, I will go to Paris and then London. Well, one thing we find is that many of the dates on letters and the information on letters is not exactly what happens, because things were changing quickly in those days. And everything was typed. There were no there were recordings, but letters were typed up, and it wasn't on internet, it wasn't on computer. So many of the dates and places, in fact, you'll see of letters are not actually where they were written from, nor was the date exactly, or like here, London. He didn't go to London. As we'll see, he went from Moscow. We saw that yesterday, we won't watch it again. But from Paris, he went to Los Angeles. We've been through this yesterday, so we won't go through this again. But we're now going to quickly go to where Prabhupada, there we are. We'll go back one slide there. This is the house. Those who were with us last night will see it, and it still is there. It's still there. And it's confirmed that Hari Vilas said, yes, that is the house. Some people were questioning it. So that's where Prabhupada came. That's where the devotees, Hari Vilas, found this building. Those were good days. You could just go up to a person and with no deposit, you could rent a house.
I have a memory of this house.
Oh.
When I was a limousine driver, my customer, a Japanese gentleman, big guy, leader of a big company, he was at the restaurant. And I went quickly to the house because Hari Vilas gave me the address. But then Vishwambar was gave me a garland of Lord Jagannath, which had a temple in the garden. And then I brought the garland. And when my customer came out of the restaurant, I gave him the garland of Lord Jagannath. And after he entered his hotel, the Hotel Clion, Place de la Concorde, the big hotel of Paris, with the garland of Lord Jagannath. And he looked so proud, so happy. You see,
Jai.
Japanese, yes, I remember.
Jai,
Jai
Radha-
Jagannath.
Jai. It was, well, it was in this house that Lord Jagannath appeared. He was installed, is not the exact word. There was no installation officially. He was just came here. Well, they actually carved him here, as we heard yesterday. He was carved here and painted here in this, probably in the garage or in this house somewhere, and was worshipped here until they moved to Rulasur. So he was worshipped in this house. Prabhupada stayed here. I think it was in this area here. There was one devotee named Gaur Chandra who was staying here at the time from America, and he didn't give this picture, another one of the house, pointing out this room was the temple, and this room was the Brahmacharya ashram, and this was the Brahmacharis, and this was that Prabhupada stay. Kind of funny. I haven't got it on this slide, I don't think. Anyway, this was the house where they were preaching for quite some time, and many devotees joined in this house. I visited this house in 1972. I spent a few days there. We were delivering incense. At that time, we heard from Hari Vilas yesterday how they started it in Paris, but we started earlier in London. Well, we started earlier in London. I was looking after the incense, spiritual sky, and we would come over and deliver incense to the French Yatra until they had their own production when Hari Vilas set it up over here. That was why I came there. And okay, we'll move on. This is, now we're going to the Olympia Theatre. This is of course, as you can guess, a Google map aerial photograph of the area, a very busy cross section in Paris. And this is here, what's it called? Rue de Capuchinis? Yeah.
Boulevard des Capucines.
Yeah, Capuchinis. And it's not far. The Opera House is over to the right, on the right side. And anyway, it's a really central area. And where that red ball is, that is you can just behind the trees, that's the Olympia Hall. It's not actually, it was the most kind of like prestigious hall, but it's not the biggest hall. It's not that big. It's built inside these blocks here. It's big, but it's not that big. There are bigger halls in the city, but it's a big hall. So we heard an amazing, incredible story of how Hari Vilas obtained this hall for Prabhupada's lecture and program. We heard that last night. You'll have to hear the recording. We won't go over it. Incredible, impossible thing. We would think, that's impossible. Nothing was impossible in those days, whether it was renting a house with not a penny in your pocket, which you certainly can't do now, or getting the most prestigious hall in the whole of Paris for somebody who's never been heard of ever before, with a bunch of, crazy looking, whatever people hiring it. These things were going on. And then as we see, not many people came. And last night we heard from Hari Vilas, only 20 people came. Here we hear in the recording 40. I heard from someone else 10, but it wasn't very many. Between 20 and 40 probably people attended, other than the devotees. There were a few from other places, but basically 20 or so from Paris and some from elsewhere. One of the first devotees I ever met, his name was Jaihari in London. He was quite an interesting person. He was there. I'll try to capture him next time I go to London, if we go. And this is where Prabhupada lectured. There's another picture of Prabhupada's lecture there at the hall. This is a direct front view. Baptist, Prabhupada baptized. That is not the sign that was there when Prabhupada was there. They had the sign, the Beatles was written up on it. As Hari Vilas said, the guru of the Beatles is coming, and quite likely the Beatles will be coming to meet him here. Of course, there was no such arrangement, but anyway, the sign was there. That was on June the 25th in the evening that he spoke here. So now we're going forward with that lecture, and there is a translation into French by Hari Vilas Prabhu, and the recording is not brilliant. That's why I don't think you'll find it anywhere on the in the database, as far maybe in the database, but it is there, but it's not in the lecture series. You know, it's translated into French. Prabhupada speaks, Hari Vilas speaks, and then the recording is not too brilliant. So are we ready to go ahead with the recording?
Yeah, I just need to fiddle around a bit.
Yeah, we'll give us a few moments here. Don't forget that Prabhupada had just flown that morning from Paris. It was a very rocky flight, as we heard yesterday. Very, very rocky. Prabhupada was hassled like anything at the immigration. For an hour or two, he was kept at immigration. Then they rushed to the India Cultural Center, Tourist Center, and Prabhupada then gave an hour, almost an hour and a half interview there. Then they went from there by taxi to the house in Fontenay Rose, which was serving as the temple. Number 2. There just now, where's it gone? I had it on the screen. I don't know where it's gone. I had it on my screen just now.
Maybe
it's disappeared back into there somehow. I don't know how that happened. Number 2.
Here.
Okay.
This one.
Yes.
Should I start the recording?
Yes, well, just give me 1 second. And then from there, Prabhupada stayed a little while in Fontenay Rose. And then in the evening, they drove over to this Olympia Hall. Prabhupada gave a lecture. And you can imagine such a schedule. And then that night, after the lecture, they got back to the temple after midnight. It was a very late program. And the next morning, Prabhupada was up early, went for a morning walk. All the devotees were sleeping practically. He woke them up. Went for a morning walk, came back, gave a lecture in the temple in Fontenay Rose. Then he went to the airport. As far as I understand, it was Orly in this case. At least Lochananda thinks it was. Others haven't mentioned. And he flew that day to Los Angeles all the way. And then he gave a short talk in Los Angeles, apparently. Stayed overnight. Next morning, he flew to San Francisco for the Rath Yatra and immediately went straight into giving a lecture at the Rath Yatra. What a schedule. We can't imagine such a thing. It's just not the capacity of an ordinary soul, somebody who's come from the spiritual realm. So here we are now at the Olympia, and we're hoping to start the lecture in a few moments. Bear with us, but Vidura is doing 2 men's job here. People on, mute them at the same time, and organize this a little bit.
Okay, everyone's muted now.
Everyone's muted.
Okay. Just give me 1
But
second.
Prabhupada's never going to be muted. He'll speak forever. We just have to, he lives forever with his words. We just have to hear them. So try to listen.
The original consciousness is that I am part and parcel of Krishna. Just like
Hold on. That was a lecture we heard
It
yesterday.
was just
Just bear with us
1
a few minutes.
copy, 2 copy.
There's 3 altogether. 1, 2, and 3. This is
Yeah, but-
1, this is 2, this is 3. So this is the one today.
Yeah. you see.
Number 2. That's not very rough. You'll get better.
thank you very much for your
This is it.
kindly participating
This is-
in this Krishna consciousness movement.
Monsieur Dame, je vous remercie pour avoir assisté, pour assister avec nous dans notre conscience de Krishna.
This movement
It'll improve, don't worry.
is very important. It is a movement to save the human society from a suicidal policy.
Ce mouvement est très important, c'est pour sauver la société humaine d'une catastrophe de destruction.
The suicidal policy, just this evening I expressed my desire to the press conference that the human society is being misled by leaders who are blind themselves.
Cette qualité de suicide présente aujourd'hui dans la société est présentée par les dirigeants de la société qui sont aveuglés eux-mêmes.
Take for example, just like there are a few blind men and another blind man is proposing to help them crossing over the street.
Par exemple, vous avez trois aveugles et le troisième aide le premier d'eux à traverser une route.
So this blind following is there in this sense that we do not know what is the aim and objective of human society.
Donc le fait de poursuivre aveuglement est présent parce que nous ne savons pas le véritable objectif.
The aim and objective of human life is self-realization and re-establishing our lost relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Le but de la forme humaine est de être réalisé en soi et de réaliser notre relation avec la suprême personnalité de Dieu.
That is the missing point. So this Krishna consciousness movement is trying to enlighten the human society on this important point.
Cela est le principe fondamental de l'existence, ce processus de la conscience de Krishna pour aider l'humanité à se rendre compte de l'importance de cette réalisation.
According to Vedic civilization, the progressive march towards perfection of life is to realize one's relationship with Krishna or God.
Selon les écritures védiques, l'avancement sur la voie de perfection est de réaliser votre relation avec Dieu, la personnalité de Dieu.
There is a book, perhaps you have read or you know, Bhagavad Gita. That Bhagavad Gita is accepted by all acharyas or authorities in transcendental science as the essence of all Vedic knowledge.
Il y a un livre appelé le Bhagavad Gita, peut-être une occurrence de ce livre, qui est accepté par tous les maîtres spirituels et les acharyas, un livre authoritatif qui explique les enseignements védiques.
In this Bhagavad Gita, we understand that the living entity, not only human beings, but other than human beings, there are many types of living entities. All of them are parts and parcels of
You can explain now.
So there's a little bit far too much background humming on this lecture. We'll play the other lecture first, which is number 3, which Prabhupada gave in Fontenay Rose.
And do you have the transcript for this one?
I have the English transcript and the French, but I don't have, we'll play the English transcript. Number 3.
Yeah. Okay, so where is it?
Give us a few minutes. When we listened to that lecture in Olympia, it wasn't so bad.
Show the
Sam
correct
can go
slide.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very
How do I
much
get?
for your
Oh, I see.
in this Krishna consciousness movement.
Which one?
This movement is especially meant for human society who are serious about fulfillment of the mission of this life. There is a distinction between human life and
It's not like this all the way through, I can assure you.
one who does not know who is the proprietor of the body. Those who are under the concept of this material body as such, they are as good as any. But in the human form of life, one can distinguish that one is not this material body, but he is a separate identity, spiritual in value. We can understand this fact if we give little attention to it, that we are changing our different bodies since the beginning of our life. We learn from Vedic literature that after sexual intercourse of the male and female, if it is fruitful, then the living entity is injected in the emulsion of the two secretions, and in the first night it took the shape of a pea, and because the living entity is there, it grows gradually, and then 9 holes evolve, which are later on developed into 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, and 1 rectum, 1 genital, like that. So when the body is complete, then the consciousness coming. So long the body is not complete, the consciousness is almost dead. It is called sushupti or sound sleeping. Then gradually, when the consciousness comes, the child within the womb feels uncomfortable and wants to come out. Therefore, at the stage of 7th month of pregnancy, sometimes the child moves. That is the process of growing. And after coming out of the womb, the body grows. But if the child comes out dead, the body does not grow. Therefore, it is to be understood that due to the presence of the spirit soul, the body grows means changes from one form to another. It is concluded by learned scholars that this change of body is taking place every moment, but the soul is there from the beginning of the life. And when this body is no longer persistible, the soul changes to another body. That is called transmigration of the soul. That is a fact. But the modern civilization does not deal with this subject matter. They are under wrong impression that this body is self. I have talked with many scholars, and they are also under the same impression that with the end of the body everything is finished. But the actual fact is different. We can remember our childhood body, we can remember our boyhood body. Although those bodies are not present, I, the spirit soul, the occupier of the body or the proprietor of the body, I am present. So this transmigration of soul is the most important factor to be understood by the human society. Unfortunately, there is no university, there is no department of knowledge to understand this important factor. That is very risky. So this soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and there are 8,400,000 species of life, and after leaving this body, we may accept any one of them. We do not know. That will depend on our action at the present moment. Practically, we are preparing our future body, and according to our work and mentality, we get a different body. Therefore, we shall be very much cautious. For any intelligent man can understand that future life is prepared at present. Just like the boy goes to the school, goes to the college, he prepares his future life. Similarly, this human form of life is a preparation ground for our future life. So, according to Bhagavad Gita, we can transfer to other planets also. This is explained in our book, Easy Journey to other planets. The present endeavor is to transfer one to the moon planet, but as we get information from the Vedic literature, we cannot transfer ourselves by mechanical arrangement to the moon planet. That is not possible. This is futile attempt. Every planet has got different atmosphere. So in order to enter into a particular planet, we have to prepare ourselves. This is also understandable very easily. Just like if we go to a foreign country, we have to prepare for visa and passport. If in this planet also we are so much restricted, how foolishly we are attempting to go to other planets without being prepared for entering that planet. Anyway, a sane man, an intelligent man, does not like to enter in any one of the material planets, because wherever we go in the material planet, the four conditions or miserable condition of material existence are there. The four miserable conditions of materialistic way of life is birth, death, old age and disease. So, from the Bhagavad Gita you understand that even if we enter into the Brahmaloka, the highest planetary system of this universe, the four principles of miserable condition, birth, death, old age and disease are there. We learn from Bhagavad Gita that one day time duration is millions of years of our calculation. That's the fact. So, but even though the highest planetary system, Brahma Loka, which the scientist says it will take 40,000 of years to go there with this Sputnik speed, but who is going there, traveling in the space 40,000 of years there with this Sputnik speed, but who is going there, traveling in the space 40,000 of years? But from the Vedic literature we can understand that any one of the planets we can enter, provided we prepare for that purpose. The exact words in the Bhagavad Gita is that Janti deva vrata devan pitrin janti pitrivrataha bhutani janti bhutejya madhya jinopi janti mam. If anyone prepares himself to enter into the higher planetary system, which is said to be inhabited by demigods, we can go there. Similarly, in the Pitri Loka, Pitri planet, we can go, or if we like, we can remain on this planet, and at last, if we desire, we can enter into the planet of the Supreme Personality of God. So, it is all preparation only. But considering the point that any planetary system within this material universe, they are temporary. Maybe the duration is very, very long time, but they are to be annihilated. As our body, there are different types of body. A human body exists for 100 years, but an insect's body exists for 12 hours. So this different body exists relatively a long duration or short duration, but they are to be annihilated. But if anyone enters into the planet which is called Vaikuntha Loka, the spiritual planet, then there is eternal life, blissful life, and full of knowledge. So a human being, if he tries, he can attain that perfection. That is stated, it is very simple in the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord says that Janma karmam dibbam jujanati tatat. Anyone who knows in truth about the Supreme Personality of God. People say God is great. That is a hackneyed word. But if we want to know how God is great, that can be also known from authorized scriptures. And just like in the Bhagavad Gita, God himself describes about himself. So we can know. So he says that simply by understanding what I am, Krishna says, or God says, Janma karma me dibbam. My appearance or taking birth, just like a human being, is transcendental. It is not exactly like the human body, but God is so kind that He comes before us as an ordinary human being. Unfortunately, one who does not know about Him, he thinks that Krishna or God is like one of us. Apajananti mang mudha. That is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Those who are mudhas, rascals, they think me as if one of the human beings. Actually, he is not. So, we have got the chance to know about him, provided we read the right literatures and the right direction, we can know. That possibility is there. And if we simply can know what is the nature of God or Krishna, simply by understanding this fact, one becomes liberated. That is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Tapta deham punarjanmanai. A person who has understood the absolute Supreme Personality of Godhead, it cannot be understood completely. That is not possible with our human intelligence. But with the help of Bhagavad Gita, the statement given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual master, we can know him to the best of our capacity. And if we can know him, then the result is that immediately after leaving this body, we enter into the kingdom of God. Taktadi hang punarjanmane. After giving up this body, he does not come again to this material world, but he enters into the spiritual world and comes to me. That is the statement. So our Krishna consciousness movement is to propagate this higher scientific idea to the people in general, and the process is very simple, simply by chanting the holy name of God. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One cleanses his dirty things in the heart, and he can understand that he duty to serve. It is also very pleasant. It appears like story, but I would say, showing a bona fide spiritual master so that a candidate will be helped from inside and outside how to approach God. This Krishna consciousness movement is meant for that purpose. The spiritual master are the representative, living representative of Krishna. He helps from outside, and Krishna as Paramatma helps from inside. In both ways, the living entity can take advantage and make his life successful. We have got many books in this connection, about 12 books of 400 pages. So this is based on the authority of Vedas, and that is summarized in the Bhagavad Gita and many other books. So we have published Bhagavad Gita as it is, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna, easy journey to other planets, nectar of devotion. So we request everyone to understand this movement by reading authoritative literatures in this connection. We are publishing our magazine, Back to Godhead, every month in so many languages. So our program is to serve the human society, to save them from the pitfall of entering again in this cycle of birth and death. That is our great mission. So I was very much glad to learn that I had to speak this night, but because I was pre-engaged for going to San Francisco, because tomorrow there will be a great Ratha Yatra festival. About 50,000 people will participate in the festival, and they have advertised my presence. So I am going this afternoon to San Francisco. So you will excuse me because I am not personally present, but I hope to come back again by the second week of July. If sufficient arrangement is made, I shall be very glad to meet the enlightened people of this city and try to make them convinced about the importance of this great movement, and that will be beneficial for our mission as well as your welfare. Thank you.
Or you want to show a few slides? Okay, so
Hare
just-
Krishna. So, dear devotees, we apologize for cutting the first lecture short. The interference was a bit overwhelming, so we cut that short, but we'll just, which we'll mention on that first visit of Srila Prabhupada to Paris, if we can get the. This is the French translation. It so happened the lecture which we just heard in English from Srila Prabhupada, devotees, they translated it later that year. And this was one of their first brochures which they distributed, was a French translation of that lecture. It says 25th, but it should be 26th of June. The lecture which Prabhupada gave,
click.
click here.
Yeah.
He gave this lecture in the temple there, and this is the French translation. It was quite an interesting experience trying to get this onto the screen. But if you want a copy of this, I can get you a copy. You can send it to the French. We haven't didn't quite finish scanning it, so this is just photographic.
You printed and distributed.
It's possible. It's possible, yeah. Prabhupada then wrote. Now again, this is an example of, let's say, maybe the servant's slight error or somebody's error. You see, it says London, but Prabhupada was not in London on the 28th of June. He was in Los Angeles. From Moscow, Prabhupada said, I went to Paris. Paris is a very nice city, better than London. Historic buildings are very gorgeous and panoramic, Prabhupada said. So we've got a very nice center there. The address is 26 Rue Etienne d'Orge, Fontenay-aux-Roses, Paris. I stayed only one day on my way to LA, but still they arranged some nice meetings and a press conference, and the people were favorably impressed. They admitted in different papers that our movement is genuine, along with other information. The day after the lecture in the Olympia Hall, there were several newspaper reports, as well as the reports from the India House. Fortunately, we don't have any of those. They apparently were lost. According to Jyoti Amai, who was one of the early devotees there, she was keeping them. She left them. She says she left them in Noisy-le-Grand, and when she later on searched for them, they were no longer there, disappeared. So maybe in the future, someone could find them. Who knows? Or go to the archives if possible and find them. From Paris, Prabhupada said, I went to LA, and 12 hours on the flight, and then the next day to Ratha Yatra, etc. And then a similar letter to Madhuvisa. Now you see there, more or less the same date when they did it was Los Angeles. So sometimes when we quote times, places, and so on, events, there's not always exactly what is written there. But anyway, the idea is there. Same letter, basically, Stephen. Papa wrote to Madhuvisa.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
pardon? Yeah, well, it worked that way, that didn't it?
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
Yeah. Unpredictable. That's the nature of this material world. We can't absolutely predict what will happen. But one thing we can predict for sure is that Srila Prabhupada words, even if the lecture in Olympia was not very clear, noise, background noise was too strong. But nonetheless, we can still, even hearing the words of the pure devotee, it may be not possible to hear it because of the sound in the background properly, but still the purification is there. Everyone who hears. This is a picture of Prabhupada in the temple in Fontenay aux Roses in 1971 when he came here. Similar picture. This picture is very common in many of our Vyasa Puja books and other places. It's a famous photograph. Prabhupada sitting there in his little room in Fontenay aux Roses. Answer Prabhupada's words, he lives forever through his words. And we see the same kind of theme. I don't know what you picked up from the little lecture we heard there in the temple. Yeah, is Gopaswami Prabhu here?
Yeah.
Well, you might like to, as you did yesterday very nicely, inquire from the devotees what they got from that lecture, or what they felt, Srila Prabhupada was passing, sharing. As we heard last night, this movement is a giving movement. It's not a taking movement. It's a giving movement. That's what we're here for, to give. Prabhupada simply gave the absolute truth. So what do we get from that lecture?
Yes.
Yeah, if you like you did yesterday, it was nice. Devotees might like to share their realizations or understandings of that short lecture.
Okay. So,
Yes.
qu'est-ce que tu as frappé dans ce que tu as entendu ce matin chez Prabhupada?
Well, the main thing I remember from this lecture of Srila Prabhupada is that we have to get out of this material engagement of birth, death, old age, disease, simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna. That's what it came into my heart, this teaching of Srila Prabhupada. Very simple, but very lovely, very, very spiritual. There is nothing more. Prabhupada explained so nicely to the French people, and I think we should print and translate in French, and distribute it to the people along with the books. With each book, we should have this pamphlet with the lecture. Prabhupada in Paris, first lecture.
So, well, it was distributed and it was translated into French. Somebody can check the French translation. I don't know how good it is, but we do have it. Gopaswami Prabhu has the pamphlet, which they were distributing. We put it on the PowerPoint just now. And yeah, it's something very historic. We heard last night, what was that first translation they did of that article of Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, Yogeshwar? I'd never seen it, huh? Yeah, the ontological, something very, very difficult. Even he said, Harivilas said, even the English was impossible to read. What to speak of the French translation. And we heard last night that one Frenchman almost beat him up over his, he pinned him to the wall. What are the words he said? I mean, like insult to our French language. What exact words were even heavier than that? What were they?
It was something like insult to the French language, and like I couldn't understand the word.
Really heavy. I mean, people are, you're distributing books in their language, you distribute something which is not only the subject matter is difficult to follow, but the translation is even worse. Is naturally local people will become very upset, every nation has it. They have national pride for their own language. She's got to be at least something reasonably good that you distribute, not something which is. Anyway, those were the days. Prabhupada was very happy that they were at least something is there in French, the beginning. Rough starts. The devotees had such a challenging start, as we know. The first devotees, they had nowhere to stay. They were, Hari Vilas was going, sometimes not Hari Vilas, Mapati, Hanuman was sleeping under the bridges on the river Seine. Hanuman was going under the bridges, and Umapati was begging people, meet on the street, can I stay with you? And hardly ever happened. They were just living under the bridges. Kapila came a bit later. Kapila wasn't there then. He came a bit later. And this was 69 when they first came. And then gradually they managed to get little places to stay here. And then they got kicked out of places. Everywhere we heard from Lochanananda how the landlord didn't like them at all. And, these crazy people making noise and smell, terrible smell of incense, terrible smell of cooking and ghee and so on. People in the mode of ignorance can't bear these things. They went through a lot of austerities. The guy turned off the electricity, turned off everything, water, everything. They had to go through real challenges there in the early days. And, we remain.
The movie about the Children.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I was went under the Pont Saint-Michel and I was playing
when they first came to Paris?
Yeah.
Really? I should try to find that. We could see that one day. Try to find that video. Anything else? When they take it away from the lecture? Anyone else?
You should have a nice comment on the whole celebration. The importance of this program.
He asked me in the car what I was thinking. Yeah, I said that it's very much more important than what we can understand. Prabhupada first coming to Paris in this. It's very important event.
Very important.
Event.
It's
important event. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I think we cannot grasp how it's big.
How important it is.
Yeah.
Installation of deities and opening of temples is also very important. But in reality, Prabhupada's first coming to Paris, coming to France, he came through his disciples, no doubt, but his personal coming to Paris, in one sense, is the most significant event that ever happened in this country. It's so significant. We may not even place so much emphasis on it. I know many devotees weren't even bothered about it. So what, or whatever. But we wouldn't be here, none of us.
Yeah, because I thought maybe you know that story. I've read it and heard it a few times, but it's Russian devotees, different Russian devotees. They wrote about that. But their uncle was in the KGB, and so he gave that uncle the book of the Prabhupada Amrita, and then his uncle called him and said, I will remember that day, I will remember that day all my life. And he said that for the Russian in the army, in the KGB, there was one point where actually almost the Third World War was started. And that was the day Prabhupada arrived in America. And it was that day that he says uncle said that like for 3 days they were, next to the boats with the red things that they will start the war or not, and they were not sleeping, and they really thought that war was going to start. And then they received things that no, it's all right, we don't send them. And when they receive the message, but they don't send the message, that's the day Prabhupada put his feet in America.
Yeah.
So it's, we never know what's behind all those things, because Prabhupada is unique. Not ordinary person, he's not ordinary devotee. So behind everything he has done, there is great, great meaning and things. And yeah, today Prabhupada step in America, it's stopped the Third World War. So maybe we won't be there. It would have been going on. So from that point of view, I think we cannot understand, because everything Prabhupada did was unique. More than an angel with eyes, so he was sung by Krishna. I said many times, he didn't want to come. Krishna told him to come. Then he came to France.
Hare Krishna.
That's the chance.
Thank you, Rishesha. The significance of Srila Prabhupada's arrival in the Western world. In America, at that time, Rishesha Mata was saying about how, practically speaking, on that day, the Third World War almost began. I've heard that before. One devotee mentioned that.
Yeah, there's two stories of two different Russian devotees.
Yeah. They were ready to press the red button.
Yeah, they were ready to press the red button.
Cuba or something. The third nuclear war could have started on the very day he arrived in Boston. So anyway, it's very significant. Very fortunate that Prabhupada, we wouldn't be here now if Prabhupada had stepped foot in Boston. In France, we don't know, of course, came later in 1971. But the seeds of our Krishna consciousness movement growing here in France were already there, you could say, but they were directed and focused by Srila Prabhupada's coming here in 71, ignited in so many people's hearts, awoken in their hearts. And from those great moments, we are yet to see, I think, the actual effect of that, but the great effect is already there in many ways. Thousands, millions of people have received books, and hundreds of thousands have chanted Hare Krishna, and it will continue like this in different ways. Maybe it's a significant event. Even if it was only 24 hours, it had such a profound, long-lasting effect on the devotees, especially those who were here at the time. Anything else?
Maybe younger than people express shortly. Do you express what you feel with this? What you heard?
It's a good question. I was a bit busy trying to organize everything, so
It's very confusing. Things are going on. I also couldn't follow the lecture because I was busily trying to keep up with things that were going on. So it was a complicated tech. Some of the younger devotees, any of the younger devotees like to comment?
I saw that Prabhupada on this lecture you speak about the main concern of French people, French mentality. This means he spoke about the main question that people ask when we try to preach to them. This means we cannot reincarnate in animals. We speak a lot of reincarnation, and we speak about sex life. This is the two concern of people in this country, like. So we can see that Prabhupada, even without living in the country, not already what the people think in this country. And the other thing I wanted to say is that yesterday, the Harinam was so ecstatic. And I think this is really Prabhupada request his mercy, this Harinam yesterday.
Aye.
It was so ecstatic, this kirtan, and people felt it. Many people who were distributing the books said us, "Oh, so long that we didn't saw you," and they were really happy to see us, and they wanted that we go again to do this every day. Yeah,
Well, you know, back in 1971, 71, the devotees were going out at least 10, 12 hours a day on Harinam. We heard that last night. I don't think 16. Hari Vilas said 16, but I think that was a bit of an over number. That would be much less time for anything else. But they were going at least 10 hours a day on Harinam, you know. And people were seeing us, even though there was only a handful of them, they were seen everywhere. And they had a regulated schedule, you know. As we heard, they were going down side streets as well. Many amazing things happened, even down the side streets. It's not just the same place every day. It can others, you know, it's amazing how Krishna has his plans. But because it was not just once a week, it was 3 times a day, in and out, and Sankirtan. So there was like, you know, that was the only program, basically. Prasadam and Harinam, right? Not much else. There was no deity worship in those early days. None. They didn't have any deities when they're in whatever Raspel. They didn't have any deities. They came later. And even when they had deities, it was very simple, extremely simple. Even in London, when I joined later, but I mean, not at that time. But the worship of Radhalaneshwar took 45 minutes in the morning. Mass. Very simple. Deities closed at 6:30, 7:50 no. It was all very simple. Jagannath dressed once a week.
But they were doing that because at that time also there was one pujari for Krishna and one for Radharani.
Yeah, very few pujaris.
So,
But it was
so because Prabhupada said it should not take more than 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So they had 2 pujaris dressing Radharani.
Even the pujaris. Huh?
Also after in Paris, when they were dressing Radha Parasishwara, they were 2.
Yeah.
One Radharani.
And then even the pujaris were going out on Harinam. Because we were well situated in London, right next to the city centre. They were also going out. The temple present, everyone was going out. It was like, you know, it was different times, different situation, but that mood, incredible mood, spreading, giving the holy name, giving whatever literature we had as best we could to people, and just going everywhere. And Harinam. Anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
In this connection, just at the end, I just said yesterday that we should not think that Prabhupada is not here anymore. And one thing I realized by this Sankirtan is that by this activity, we can really feel Prabhupada mercy. And we connect to Srila Prabhupada mood by this service. It's one thing I would feel.
Maharaj, does anyone know the name and the date of the first ISKCON employee, ISKCON Vaishnava, ISKCON Prabhupada who came to Paris?
Well, the first ones who came, we mentioned already, was Hanuman and Umapati.
Oh, Hanuman.
Yeah.
Umapati.
Exact date, sometime in 69, late 69. Yeah.
Maharaj, you may confirm it. I few years ago, Bibi Govindaswamy was telling me, Bibi Govindaswamy, he told me how in America he was giving a lecture in a hall that long time before he came to France. There was nothing in France. So from the guest, people,
Who was giving lecture?
Prabhupada, he was lecturing, and there was one person was very interested by Prabhupada's lecture. He was smiling, and then he spoke with Prabhupada. He wanted to preach, he wanted to surrender to Prabhupada. So he told him, where are you from? He said, I am from France, but I am from Algeria. So Prabhupada said, then you should go to Paris. Then he told him, are you Brahmachari or married? He said, no, I am Brahmachari. Then he thought you should marry before going there. And he made arrangement with some Mataji there. Bibi Govinda Swami told me that story. And that person, he came to Paris. But then I don't know what happened.
What was his name, you know?
So some other devotees may know his name. And I spoke to Mandakini Mataji. She remembered, but she could not remember the name.
He came a little bit later. He came in 70 or 70.
He was the first one who came before that. He was the first.
No one's mentioned it.
But
You'd have to ask
someone
Bibi
told me
Govinda.
this story.
Before 1969.
Yes. Right. Long time.
Interesting. Yeah, sometimes, however, you do find that memories are not always correct. Sometimes they get completely wrong here. I mean, even last night, several devotees were mentioning things which were contradictory to each other in terms of place and time. They forget the year, the place. Sometimes that happens. The memories are not always accurate. When they're correlated or agreed with others, you get a better picture, or they're recorded, of course. That's something that's not always. It's interesting. We'd have to ask Bibi Govinda Maharaj.
Yes, maybe you should investigate.
Because no one's put it
Or
up.
find the name of
no
this person.
Certainly no one last night mentioned it. No record is there in any of the evidences. Harry Vilas apparently was working in the American, yeah, he was working there, and that's, one of the reasons that, they were able to begin the preaching there. He was working there.
Anybody else want to say some personal comment on this?
Just I remember from Harry Vilas, he told us that the first thing Srila Prabhupada told him, he says, when I was even a child, I never forget Krishna. It was very important. But Srila Prabhupada wanted to show he was different. He was not an ordinary person. So significant for me to really see about that as a special mission and a special importance for us.
Well, the same kind of theme came up here in today's lecture. I don't know where it was, but Prabhupada was mentioning similar thing. Just find it now. Yeah, he talked a lot about the soul in the body, this morning. How the soul develops. The difference between animal consciousness, human consciousness, and how modern society doesn't deal with this subject of transmigration or the soul at all. Transmigration from one body to another.
And so praise the French education about culture and art. It was a good place to preach. He said it's more important than London.
That was in a letter which Prabhupada wrote.
But the architecture, Prabhupada's Paris was the most beautiful city in the world. Which is true, it's very beautiful. I was amazed yesterday, it's really beautiful.
I think when he was in the museum that I was driving, I think we went around the Arc de Triomphe and saw all the avenues starting from there and the beautiful buildings. And I think, I'm not sure, that Prabhupada said it's almost like Dwarka.
But it's aimed towards sense purification rather than aiming towards spiritual.
Yeah, he said that about the houses too last night, didn't he? How all the houses in Fontenay Rose were so nice, beautiful. Yes. Very nice gates, nice windows, doors, everything's so nice.
Yes, but the owner is attached.
He's very attached to this. He will become a
cockroach.
All these are
in the house, in the next
It's
lifetime.
already cut.
Yeah.
I can just go to my techniques. Like from the three of them, like Vachananda Prabhu is, I remember how he stressed that how it was austere. It's a very, very austere. You know, meeting, it's very austere to go out and stuff. And Vilas Prabhu, he said that we are regular, doing any condition, don't stop. And he added that it's all happening. Sankirtan Maharaj continue.
Aye.
And then everything comes from that. Like, from them, you know, everything came from that. And from Yogeshwar Prabhu, I took it, you know, something significant also. I explained about memory and things like that. And also that, well, you know, at this time we are like stealing flowers and doing all kind of things. It was transcendental. And then, yes, because it was emergency, as that's a fact. It was emergency. And later on, like, you know, 50 years later, you know, probably Prabhupada and Krishna, they are, you know, expecting that we are naturally taught. And we can take more from their message, from their inspiration. So I think like that, like on one side, austere emergency preaching, book distribution later. And that's one, that's the basics, and everything we go through that. But also, it doesn't mean that we should only stay like that. We should also reap the fruit of these activities, which are the purification of the people in general in France. And we can see that there is a whole team, a whole part, young people especially, and also old people who are considering us more seriously. So, but stress very much, you know, this movement is genuine. When he was the letter, he said, you know, yeah, press people, they wrote, this movement is genuine. That was very important for Prabhupada to show that this movement has a great importance to say society. It's not just sentimental. People, they see us chanting, they, you know, they always, you know, Hare Krishna, you know, like that. But, you know, not to stress the goal is also to that the leaders, they understand the great, real importance of this movement, genuine. And the other point is that, you know, we should read also add now to the arena and book distribution basis, which must go on. We should also add, reap the harvest, the fruits of that. And this is to take care of people who have been purified,
That's an emergency.
Like 50 years of chanting Hare Krishna, 50 years of distributing thousands and thousands of books in France, not for nothing. Some effects is there, it's practical. So therefore, many people are very purified. We can see in our book, many young people are coming and they are, you know, vegetarian, because I agreed before. They're asking about spiritual questions. They are non-sectarian, they accept Hare Krishna. So this is the fruit of the 50 years of preaching in books. And this has to be taken now seriously also.
It's an emergency. The emergency is even more prominent now. It may be a different, you know, externally it's different, but the internal principle is still the same. It's still an emergency. The way you deal with an emergency may vary, but it's still a very emergent situation. The world is much more, in many ways, much more critical than it was 40, 50 years ago, in many ways. People are completely blinded. At least there was still a little bit of, you could say, brain substance. Some of the people's brains now are sold out to modern technology. They're just locked into social media, etc., etc. Different way of capturing them, maybe, but the same principle is there.
But what we were saying with us also, I was very surprised because you know, on Facebook, on YouTube, I saw a video of something it's hard to believe unless you see it, but in Paris, every year there is a manifestation of, I don't know what's the name of the group. And they are vegan, and their own slogan is close the slaughterhouse, close the slaughterhouse. And there is more people than we have at the Lafayette. It's amazing, and it's in Paris.
Yeah.
And they all work with photos of animals.
Yeah.
And they say they are like, but I think the people are, in a way, people have become very compassionate, and before they could not understand. But the vegan people, it's amazing. It's about compassion for the animals. They understand the animals are like us. They are living entity. They're not just things. But I'm really amazed. I have seen 2 of those manifestations, and there are so many people. You couldn't believe that they are aware of that. Don't feed animals. Close the slaughterhouse. It's just what Prabhupada was saying. Close the slaughterhouse. You're not human beings. Close the slaughterhouse. But people now are aware of that.
All these movements today, like Simple Life, ICT, that's the byproducts are preaching what is here. One important byproduct. And therefore, to say, like Krishna said, no one will forget to also preach to my devotees. So these people, they are devotees because their purification can turn to something tangible. Therefore, we also preach to them. Take care of them. So that's the second part for sure.
Hare Krishna. So today we are Dayanatai Prabhu. What's the schedule?
We will go to do Abhinav and sometimes
Kamishka.
And we have to.
We leave at 2:30?
No, we have to be there around 2:30.
We leave here 1:30?
We have to be around.
And what about lunch? Is that being, lunch is in control, under control?
Yeah, I have to
Do whatever. Don't disconnect.
can be served, I think, at 12:30.
If it's ready, if it's ready. If it's ready. Don't overdo yourself.
Who's cooking lunch?
And we have to know that the line from St. Louis is closed today. We have to go to Gare.
Oh, Sunbridge is closed today. Okay.
So it's good to know.
The train goes straight from Garchas to Saint Michel, doesn't it?
Straight, yeah.
No, you have to change at the Gare du Nord from D to B.
D does not
Across from the right.